So this is vlog 16. Um, and I have an update that I did not go through with the MECFS documentary that they're filming in Massachusetts. I didn't think I'd make a good subject, but also I just wanted to mitigate any opportunities for me to get worse on some level, whether it's through like getting infected or whether just it's too taxing on me. I've not been doing well lately. I've been falling asleep throughout the day. Some of that's probably my fault because of just the lack of pacing, and I have a lot more energy at night, but still, it's just I wake up feeling very ill. Um, what I did want to talk about was about this illness and sort of how it fits into this the larger cultural phenomenon of sort of like what I would call never-ending nostalgia. Now, I already had big problems with nostalgia because the way it's described in this essay called "Past Futures." Uh, let's see, what is it called? "Past Futures: Nostalgia in the Age of Escapism." Is that this author who made and I'll link it in not only the essay but the video essay that they made out of it, was that they say that the 2000s were the first truly digital decade and the first decade of the public internet. So, alongside the spike in innovation and globalization, the noughts were also characterized by intoxication with what came before, simultaneously shoving us into the future and tugging us back into the past. This isn't bad or good because nostalgia isn't necessarily or restrictively derivative. It can also be productive and creative, evident through some recent original television series with nostalgic undertones. Um, I have a different opinion on that, and I don't agree with it. I don't agree that it is, for the most part, good or positive. I don't think it breeds a lot of innovation. I think we've seen this in things like Star Wars, um, which I enjoyed as a child, obviously, right? But I don't need it anymore, if that makes sense. So you have like 40-year-old, 50-year-old grown men being like whining and whinging about Star Wars. Like, who gives a shit? Right? Or like complaining about some intellectual property that Disney bought or some other corporation bought, and they're just continuing to expand the universe. um I read a tweet. Was it a tweet or something a couple of days ago that I sent to my friend, and it was this kid. Let me see if I can drag it up. And basically, the gist of it was this person must have been only in their like 15 years old or some shit. And what they had written I guess it was from Reddit. And he says, "I wish I was a 2000s kid," which is ridiculous to me. I was born in '85. It says, "Born in 2010, currently 14, and thanks to my older brother, 2022, I experienced some 2000s nostalgia." 2000s nostalgia. I don't even know what that means, by the way. I even got to play his Wii. His Wii. I remember when Wii came out when I was in college. So this is not like nostalgia for me, obviously. Why can't I? Why couldn't I? Or couldn't I have been born earlier? I feel like I missed out on a lot, and people born in 2000 to 2010 get little to no respect on the internet, and they think us 2010 kids are iPad kids. Like, dude, I got to watch Phineas and Ferb. No, I don't even know what the fuck that is. Actually, go outside and play football, and I watch Smosh. Don't know what that is. and those edgy SpongeBob's YTPs. I don't know what that is at a young age. I know what SpongeBob is, but I don't know what YTP is. So I have no clue what the point that this fucking kid is trying to make. And I'm at that age now where I have to call people kids because I'm like about to be 40 in several months. And so, like, now I'm thinking to myself, like, oh shit, like, everything has been like compressed on some level because I do obviously do remember the early 2000s, but my memories of that was when I was in high school and college. This kid was born when I had finished my first graduate degree. So he's talking about I'm being born in 2010. He doesn't get any respect. I was like, what the fuck? I had never ever had this. That thought had never crossed my mind when I was 14. I wasn't like some Rodney Dangerfield-esque person going like, oh, I can't get any respect around it. Like that. I don't know what the fuck this kid's talking about. And his like nostalgia for the earlier 2000s, like and this idea. He's like, I don't know if like because like 2010 would put him in like the maybe the almost Gen Alpha, Gen X, like Edge, whatever. Maybe I don't know the exact dates. So he's talking from a perspective of like, I used to go outside. I was like, yeah, well, I spent 99% of my childhood outside for activities for the most part, you know. And the preceding generations was probably even more if you can imagine it. So like I don't know if he's trying to like just be like I was born in the wrong decade. That kind of tropish persona that people put on. But like for him, nostalgia is like uh is something that like again it's a negative on some level because he can't escape it. Right? It's not about escapism like this article suggests. It's that you can't escape it. That's now the problem. The problem is it's everywhere. It's not just other people's memories. It is a generalized phenomenon, right? Now, so you like, for example, like when I was younger, yes, people did gather around for, let's say, the finale of a television show, right? I clearly remember like my relatives coming over and watching the end of like some sitcom that I probably didn't watch, but they did. And it was some sort of social phenomenon. But in the age of the internet, it has an additional layer to it where you can now like in real time comment on it, right? You can give input on it and you can replay it through a GIF or you can just replay it through video. Whereas that was back then, it was sort of, yeah, there was a social component to it, but it ended in that moment for the most part, right? You could maybe talk about it in the water cooler the next day. Like I remember when The Sopranos ended, I went to my neighbor's house and we watched the finale of The Sopranos, right? And then that was it. Yeah, you talked about it because it was fascinating, obviously, and people still talk about it to this day because it's very iconic. But I don't have like nostalgia for that. People have nostalgia for things that, and I think part of it is like people can't feel things anymore, or if they do, they just want to feel like intensely something, anything. It's like this is why people do drugs, right? They just want to feel different, right, or differently. And I think YouTube or the streaming services or the like Kick or Twitch or these other or Rumble or these other things, they want to feel something. They can go back and replay it. They can relive their childhood a little bit. I was on YouTube and I was watching. They had like old sports centers from like '96, and I was like, oh, I remember this, right? I remember this format. And but then after that, I got bored of it because I was like, this is not interesting to me. So just to tie this in a little bit to like illness, it's there's the same sort of pattern where there's an inescapability to it. When you're chronically ill, you can't escape it. It's impossible, right? Unless you get lucky, right? Um, and so it's not quite pathological, right? In the sense that um, in the early 2000s when they were starting to write about like nostalgia, like I have a paper like brought up on it. They were they had originally thought that nostalgia was a mental disorder, which is fucking insane. Yeah, nostalgia is a psychiatric disorder. So in the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, it had uh, it had been categorized as a a kind of what they called it immigrant psychosis, right? Which probably had more to do with like a homesickness kind of thing, right? Is what they're talking about. Um, so it was population based, soldiers, people who had been at sea, immigrants, first year boarding or university students were experiencing it more, right? And so, and I'm not saying homesickness isn't real, but it seems to have a different context as history has progressed and society has the conditions for society have changed. So this paper makes mention of it as it has as having existential functions, right? Um, and so what they say is that it's a search. The existential function obviously is a search for identity. Being chronically ill entangles with that because you now have lost your identity, right? So, well, for the most part, you've lost a lot of who you were, right? And so nostalgia is doubly damning, um, and injurious to that, because now we live in this ready-made mm, ambient digital networking of imagery and ready-made sort of uh, you know uh, videos and whatever that from your past that you can just consume, and it sort of replaces on some level that identity that you once had. It's different, I think, for people who are healthier, who are using it as a lot of things. They're using it as escapism. They're using it as, again, a form of identity, sort of like indexicality, right? They're using it as a way to regulate themselves. So I have a friend who works in social work, and they say that a lot of social media and a lot of um, the consumption around nostalgia has a lot to do with like self-regulating, because for the obvious reasons is that if it comes from childhood, that is when you for most people felt some sort of safety or familiarity. Even if it wasn't safe, it was familiar, right? And so even if you didn't have a good childhood, at least things from that era were familiar, and that still more or less makes you feel safe. um Now, like I said, being ill and being sick adds a level of complexity to it, um, because I even struggle with this a little bit because um, it's daunting to day in and day out have to want to not be sick, right? But also have to like accept it. But then there's all these temptations to escape from it as well, right? And the internet is obviously an easy place to do it in, or some maybe I don't know, it's like even your own memories, right? So in this article, um, yeah, it says It has the existential function is it solidifies and augments identity. That's one function of it. It regenerates and sustains a sense of meaning, and it buttresses and invigorates social connectedness. Now, that may have been true at some point, but it seems to me that it's more alienating than anything. And um, and the identities that it's trying to um, reaffirm or sustain doesn't seem to um, doesn't seem to help the person grow in any sort of meaningful way. For example, I think a lot of the times it allows people to wallow in the sort of the emotions that are not necessarily healthy for them, and it's not grieving to move beyond grief, it's grieving for grieving's sake. Now, there's a lot of grief in being chronically ill. And so I think there's you have nostalgia for when you were healthy, obviously, right? And so you're constantly grieving that. And so like this is almost why purposely I don't have like social media to the I feel fortunate I don't have social media where like I can go back and look at pictures from like 10, 15, 20 years ago or whatever from when I was like healthier or something. Like I have some photos, but not a lot where I can go back and like, oh man, I missed this. I almost feel fortunate that I don't have that. But then again, I still have my memories, and um, I still have the sort of anguish of not being able to do things I would like to do that I once previously was able to do. And so you do have this never ending nostalgia of your formerly healthy life. And you can never really, even if there are these things are true, what they're saying, which is that it helps to reaffirm an identity or something like that or find meaning, you never find it when you're necessarily chronically ill. I know some people do, right? Some people find meaning and whatever, but you can never, it's hard to find it through nostalgia. You have to find it through some way of dealing with it in a what I think is a healthier way to do it. Right? I know there's a book by I can't remember her name. It's like how to like be sick or how to be chronically ill or something like that. And that seems there seems to be um, probably more guidance there for how to establish an identity within the framework of chronic illness. Um, so like nostalgia is a real pain in the ass, right? It's because it's pervasive. Um, it is almost um, like being drunk on your own like wish fulfillment to for times that were maybe easier or for to want to go back and experience something again, right? And so but the problem is that it's so readily available. It's no longer just your memories, right? It is digitally warehoused everywhere. There are servers that are now our collective cultural identities and memories, and it's no longer just belonging to you anymore. You're part of a larger. This doesn't really exist, but it's for lack of a better word, like noosphere of knowledge and um, uh, collective, like I said, experience, shared experience, but it's almost artificial in some way, right? It's not like we all decided to get together and have some communal experience. We're being like moths to a flame, drawn to this thing, this thing I'm in front of me. And the same thing with um, like a television show or something. I remember when I worked at uh, before I got sick, I worked at a school, and I remember it was like a big thing It was a English language learning school, so it was an international school, and so there were there's tons of people from different countries. And I remember we were watching. It was the last episode of Game of Thrones, and we all got into the auditorium or the study hall where like there's like this large like movie screen that dropped down, and we watched it, right. And people were that was like people were, you can feel like, yeah, it was like a communal event, but it was just fascinating to me that people, well, besides the fact that it sucked, but people from different walks of life, um, this show resonated with them, and um, wanted to share it with other people, presumably, so they could have not only experience, but it's not. I don't want. I don't want to. I don't want to say it's not genuine in that capacity, but there is something that is, like I said, like almost algorithmic about it and mechanical about it, and that is the that's problematic for healthy people. The problem for unhealthy people who have something like MECFS is that you have to relive the same day over and over and over and over and over again. These people are who are healthy are already have um, to deal with it in the sense that they are being sort of almost programmed to and chosen and selected by the internet through their browsing history and through um, their viewing history and their selection and preference history, and it's things are being chosen for them for or suggested for them to view, or to, hey, you may like this because you recently watched this, kind of like how Amazon used to do it. If you bought this, you may like that, you may also be interested in this, right? So now it's making suggestions for you, and so there's not quite the it's not you're identifying more with a product than you are a memory. Your memories are becoming objectified almost, and they're being packaged and digitally manipulated to be sold back to you on some capacity, to be just to be consumed for consumption's sake, not for you to have some sort of growth or psychological, you know, um, remedying or revitalization of this your sense of identity, yourself. That's not what's happening here. And so that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Nostalgia is a bitch. I don't like it. I don't think right now it's in a positive place for most people. I see a lot of people struggling. You see it in politics with people saying, well, we want to go back to when things made more sense, right? We want to go back to when, like, for example, like gender roles made more sense or something, or whatever, or the world made more sense, or before things got crazy and out of hand, or whatever in the geopolitical landscape, or they want to go back to when, like, I don't know, like even like racial divisional lines were more clearly delineated, or they want to go back to just more simpler economic times, right? I go to work, I pay this amount of taxes, and I'm able to buy a home and whatever. And you see that a lot on Twitter. You see these Twitter things sort of like appealing to, like, like TradCon things is very much a niche, but um, uh, prevalent, I guess you would call fetish, right? It's sort of like you see like these like TikTok influencers or Instagram influencers like pretending like it's like the 1940s or 50s, and those little misses, and they're like, I really just love cooking for my husband, and it's just like, it doesn't, this thing, I mean, it's bullshit. I mean, they're all just role playing. There's something right away, there's no like constitution of self there, right? It's just all for other people's sake, so they can feel like safe, like, oh, at least someone's doing it, like it still exists. It's like when it really doesn't, right? Even like you go to fucking the Middle East, it's barely there, right? Like these like theocracies, it's like barely there. You go to the fucking, think of like any sort of like tradition, what we would consider like a traditional society, and it's just not, it's really not as there as we think it is. Their traditions have all been sort of lost, or they've just been sort of recycled and fed back to them in the same capacity that they are done in the West, right? Or they're perfunctory, right? They just sort of go through the motions, It's sort of like like Italian Americans here, like thinking that they have like any connection to like anyone in fucking Napoli or something. Most Italian Americans don't even know what part of the fucking Italy they're from. Say they would people like from Ireland. They have no clue. They just say like, "Well, I'm Irish and they're Americans." Like, it's meaningless. They don't have like nostalgia for any of that stuff. It's not really part of their identity or how or anything they do is reflexive of that. This was just sort of a rant or a gripe, I guess, but I don't know. I don't like it because I never liked nostalgia in film either. I thought film is like one of the most manipulative tools for nostalgia. I was just talking to my friend about this, and we were talking about Cinema Paradiso, and there's actually it's this weird conflict of for example, the whole film is told as a story about this young boy, and he's living in this small Italian village, and he gets to acquainted with this projectionist, and it's really about like the sweetness of being like a child and growing up and falling in love and his first love and stuff like that, and the romanticism of cinema itself. Right, there's like a lot of just beauty. It's like it is really like an ode to cinema, and it's scored by Ennio Morricone, and it's like he's like the best, So like, and it really tugs at your heartstrings, and the ending is phenomenal. But there's also a scene where this doesn't really spoil anything, but like there's a scene which in the film where the projectionist tells the older, now older, like teenage protagonist, like, don't give in nostalgia. Don't come back to this city. Don't come back here. There's nothing for you here. Right. And there's a strong message in that. There's a strong message in the fact that you have to keep moving on some level. Right. I think it's okay for it to be up here sometimes. It's just I think that's just natural. Right. And also too, like seems to be conditional, but there is some wisdom from that guy that we don't have anymore. Someone's telling you to resist it, right? They're telling you the Thomas Wolfian idea of you can't go home again is actually true in the movie at least. But now we're saying, oh no, you can go home again, right? And not only that, you can just put it on your playlist. So I don't know. I'm not like into philosophy or psychology that much, but I do think nostalgia is personally, at this point at least, it might at some point it's probably served a unique purpose, and it probably does serve a psychological purpose of like being able to recycle out and funnel things. So and they're probably right. It does serve like functions, right? Because clearly it exists, so it serves a function. But in the digital society, it's toxic and poisonous, I think, to people, and it gets people angrier and sadder than they need to be because it's self-indulgent rather than self-revelatory. Anyways, that's all I had to say. I mean, that was longer than I wanted to talk, but hope everyone's doing okay, and hopefully I'll be able to work on. I don't have so much like acid reflux today. Hopefully I'll be able to work on this documentary and put it out there at some point, but I'll work on my own thing at this point. I've been actually doing a lot lately. I've been writing my blog. I've been making videos, and I'm editing something right now. So like, I'm gonna go rest. I'm tired. Like.